Hey guys, what's up? It's Sydney and welcome back to my channel and to my series Missing Since 1910. And before we get into the case today, I did want to throw out there, if you do want to give me a follow on Instagram, you can do so. It is at Sydney's Poisonous, and my jewelry shop where I sell crystals and stuff like this, if you like things of this nature, that is at Perfect Poison Shop. And if you want to follow the YouTube, it is at Sydney's Poisonous YouTube. So go ahead and give those a follow, and let's get into the video. This week we are going to be covering the disappearance of Ambrose Small. Ambrose Small was born January 11th, 1863 in Brantford, Ontario, to parents Daniel Small and Ellen Brazil. The family moved to Toronto when Ambrose was only 17 years old. Ambrose's father, Daniel, ran the Grand Hotel, and Ambrose actually got a job when he was a teenager across from where his father worked at the theater, taking tickets and basically being an usher. As Ambrose was very intelligent and very persistent on what he wanted to do, his interests in theater grew, and his interest in being a businessman grew as well. He worked really hard to climb up the corporate ladder, and he actually was the treasurer of the Grand Opera House. He then left to take a position with the Vaudeville Toronto Opera House. Continuing to move up, he went from management to chairman of the Canadian Theatrical Managers Association. He started buying a mass amount of theaters in Toronto and quickly became a financial success. And like many entertainment tycoons, Small definitely took advantage of the benefits of being around a bunch of beautiful women who were in the choir. He attempted and succeeded most times at seducing them with alcohol and chocolates in basically like a private showroom for himself in the back of the theaters. Like I said, he was often successful because he was incredibly handsome and charming for that time period. I wouldn't say now his style would be so accepted with the mustache and everything. Personally, not my thing, but yeah, he was a very attractive man and very charming, and the ladies liked him. So as most men do, he eventually settled down and got married. I wouldn't actually say settled down, but he did get married to Teresa Corman. And oddly enough, this woman was technically his stepsister. It was his stepmother's daughter. So I don't know if like his stepmother was his ex-stepmother when, like, you know, their parents got divorced or something. I don't know. Even though you're not blood related, step sibling or not, that's still freaking gross. But nonetheless, Teresa's family was inherently wealthy, and the couple would actually look forward to becoming a part of that fortune as well. Even though he did marry Teresa, his activities at the theater actually continued, and he continued seducing women and taking them to the back room and having sex with them. So not a great guy. And his wife, Teresa, or stepsister, whatever you want to call her, was very much aware of his activities. Not only was he a womanizer, but he was actually a very heavy gambler as well. So that was also an issue within their marriage. Moving on to the disappearance. So the day before Ambrose actually disappeared, as you might recall me saying before, he actually owned a bunch of theaters and he was a financial success even before what I'm about to tell you. But he actually ended up selling his empire the day before to the Trans-Canada Theatre Limited company, and it was a deal that he made for $1.7 million. So he made this deal. They cut him 2 checks, one of those checks being $1 million check. He went to the bank and deposited the check, and as he handed it to the cashier kind of freaked out because they had never seen such a large amount before, so they kind of commented on it. And they said that Ambrose was very happy and like upbeat, and there was nothing that seemed to be wrong with him at the time. But I would be fucking happy and upbeat too if I just got $1 million check and a 700,000 one on the way as well. I would be jumping up and down with joy. So, well, granted, that was the day before. So the day of his disappearance, he was actually working late in the office. And this was actually verified by his attorney at the time, who was named FWM Flock. He then reported that Mr. Small walked into a snowstorm because it was snowing very heavily that day, and he lost sight of him, and that was the last time that he had seen him. So he left work, walked into a snowstorm in the middle of the night, and vanished. This case actually baffled all of Canada. It was basically became an international issue and was heavily publicized through the media. Because it was heavily publicized, a international search did begin for Mr. Small. He was a very wealthy man at the time too, so not only was his disappearance a mystery, but it was also basically headline news because this guy became a millionaire the day before. They searched and searched for Mr. Small, and they actually came up with no results. They searched the surrounding areas for signs of like his body or maybe his possessions that he had on him at the time, but they did not find anything in the area. Like I said, it was snowing very heavily, so I don't know exactly how well they might have searched the area due to all the snowfall, and the signs of struggle would not be there anymore because of the snowfall. So if there were signs of struggle, as in, you know, blood in the snow, or if there was, you know, scuffle marks in the snow, it would be distorted because of the snowstorm that was happening on that evening. Not only that night would have been a problem due to the snowfall, but Teresa, his wife, actually did not report Ambrose missing until 2 weeks after his disappearance. Even after the 2 weeks of Ambrose's disappearance, the money actually had not been touched. It was still safe and secure in his bank, which made police believe that he definitely didn't run away or anything like that, because he would have had to use that money at some time. Now, you're probably wondering why Teresa did not contact the police after 2 weeks of her husband's disappearance. So as far as Teresa goes, she claimed that she did not report her husband missing until 2 weeks after his disappearance because she thought that he was just off with one of his mistresses, enjoying his new fortune. And she said that's why she did not contact the police right away. But regardless of the affair, she did still put up a $500 reward for any information leading to his discovery or return. And at the time, $500 in today's money with inflation would be about $6,200. So that's quite a bit of money for the time, but the police did not think that this was a sufficient amount because they did believe that it was a kidnapping. So they actually encouraged Teresa to raise the amount to $50,000 at the time. And at this rate, with today's inflation, that would be about $613,000 in today's money. And that actually still had no result. Apparently, as the police thought this was not a kidnapping and there was no ransom wanted for the return of Ambrose. So now we're going to get into the suspects. So the first one I want to talk about is actually Mr. Small's personal secretary and friend, John Doty. Now, John Doty, among all of Small's employees, was actually very underpaid. So he might have had a vendetta or grudge against that as well, considering that Small was one of the richest men in Canada at the time and could have paid his people very well. But as we all know, that is not how the wealthy stay wealthy. Not only was John heavily underpaid, but he was actually acting very suspicious, and he was exhibiting a lot of suspicious behavior in the 2 weeks especially that Ambrose was missing. John took a new position with a company in Montreal but actually didn't end up staying once he heard about the disappearance of Ambrose Small and how publicized it was. He actually ran all the way to the United States. Not only did he take a new position with a different company, but Doty stole about $150,000 in bonds out of the safe of the bank that Ambrose Small used the day of his disappearance. So very, very odd timing, I would say, John. So as I mentioned, he did run to the United States, and he was arrested about a year later for fraud and impersonation, basically. And they actually found out that it was him, and they found the missing bonds that he had stole about a year before in his sister's attic at the time. He actually received a sentence of 6 years for larceny, and they actually tried to get information out of him for the disappearance of Ambrose, but he did not say a word. They even offered to reduce his sentence, to shave time off, to move him to a better facility, but he denied all of these things, saying that he had no idea what happened to Ambrose. But even with the financial proof, in my opinion, with the missing bonds and everything like that, they still did not have enough evidence, and they could not convict him of the disappearance of Ambrose, kidnapping, murder, or anything like that. The second suspect is going to be Teresa Small herself, Ambrose's wife. Now, usually when you hear of a disappearance or a murder of a spouse, you always look to the husband or wife first. In this case, that would prove true, in my opinion. I believe that Teresa had something to do with it, simply for the fact that if her husband were to die, she would stand to inherit $2 million from his death. Not as if this would be like life-changing money for Teresa anyway, because her family was wealthy, but greed can do crazy things to crazy people. So there's that. Teresa could have also been angry because she did know about her husband's affairs and the fact that he was still having them after they got married. Ambrose was also a serious gambler, and he had a bad gambling problem, so that caused a lot of stress on their relationship as well. Not only the cheating and the money as far as the gambling goes, but they did also have a difference of opinion as far as religion and politics go. So it seems like they didn't agree on anything, to be honest with you. Ambrose was not a fan of the Catholic Church, as Teresa was a devoted member of the Catholic Church. So they did disagree on a lot of things. And not only that, but there was a money motive as well. There was also a rumor that Teresa actually paid a hitman $20,000 to take her husband out. And this hasn't been verified. There was a deathbed confession by Teresa, but the judge ruled it as forged, so they did not accept that into the case. And Teresa died in 1936. Now, as far as the theories go, I want to go with the more likely case that he was murdered. I think that that is the strongest case. There's a money motive, there is a love motive, there is anger motive, there is a gambling addiction. I just think that Teresa had something to do with this murder. There's actually a theory that Teresa and John, the secretary, were actually having an affair, but I don't necessarily believe this, considering the fact that he moved to Montreal and then he ran to the United States. I would assume that if it was an affair, they'd want to stay together, and you can't really do that if you're living in a different country. I definitely think that it was the wife. I just see more motive there, in my opinion, with the affairs, the gambling, all of that. I just see way more motive there. Maybe John Doty was basically just a thief and he wanted the money. And that could very much be the case, and he just didn't want to get charged with larceny, so he ran. But he eventually got caught anyway. Another theory is that his gambling bookie or whoever killed him. And I want to also disagree with this theory because I don't think that a bookie is going to kill you because dead man don't pay. So another theory is that he committed suicide, but again, they did not find a body or anything like that. So this theory to me is bullshit as well. And another theory is that he basically like succumbed to nature. He died from the elements, and I don't agree with this either, because they would have found something, bones, flesh, something. Even if he were to have like been eaten by an animal or something, there would be some type of remains. And that brings us to our last theory, and that he was murdered. And I definitely think that he was murdered. Like I said, I think the wife had a lot of motive, and I think that there were a lot of people that didn't like him. He had a lot of enemies because he was a business tycoon. He was basically having sex with every woman that he could. And I wonder how many of those women that he slept with had husbands as well. And that maybe it was one of the angry husbands. But I definitely see Teresa being the best suspect in my opinion for this, because there is the most motive. But in any event, the case was officially closed on December 4th, 1960. It is to be considered a cold case, and they basically discarded the 3-inch file that they had on this case. They did get a lot of leads when it went international, but none of those leads actually panned out to anything. So it went officially cold in 1960. There have been multiple stories that have been written about this crime, and there's actually a movie as well, Sleeping Dogs Lie, which looks really interesting. I looked it up. I watched the trailer of it after I did my research, and it looks pretty good. I'm gonna go watch it and kind of check it out and see if it's good or not, or how close it is to the story. But yeah, that's basically it. There's no evidence in this case. He basically just vanished, and whoever, you know, made him disappear did a really good job. But that is it for this case. Please let me know what you think down below. Let me know who you think did it, who your favorite suspect is in this case, and if you think that they should have kept looking for information on Ambrose's smallest disappearance, and if you think the deal, the $1 million deal that he made, or $2 million deal essentially, was any part of it. But let me know what you guys think down below, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye.